Hello. This section is entitled Initializing Data Systems with Products, Cloud SQL Part 4. This is a wrap-up of the Cloud SQL material. And so we're going to cover some various topics, and then one of which we'll actually go through an example of. So the first topic is customer managed encryption keys, or just encryption in general. So the first thing you need to know about Cloud SQL is that by default, all the data at rest is encrypted using a Google key. So you have encryption at rest without doing anything. And if you need a higher level of encryption, you can use your own key, which is customer managed encryption keys, and in which case the data is encrypted at rest using your keys. The next topic is backups. So by default, backups are automatically operating with Cloud SQL. And at any point, you can do what's called a point-in-time recovery, where you basically pick a point in time, and then you can recover your database to that point in time. And in that case, though, it will basically recover to a separate database that then you can then turn into your primary database if you're so inclined. So that's already available and works out of the box. Now, separately, you can actually create backups at certain points in time. And when you do that, with those backups, there are at a particular point in time, but that's when you take them. And those kind of backups, you can actually restore your current database to. The only catch is when you're doing a restoration operation, that database is essentially unavailable to serve up data. So that's another kind of backup, kind of a scheduled backup. The next topic we're going to cover is read replicas. So one of the what read replicas do is allows you to create a read-only copy of your database. And the primary purpose of these is that you can then turn around and offload sort of like read-heavy operations off of your primary database so that your primary database could be basically do more of the updates. So, and then you can have up to 10 read replicas per primary instance. And you can also, one of the features is you could actually run your read replica across regions. And again, that creates kind of a read-only copy that's close to your users. That's the primary use of that. Okay. The next topic we're going to actually get into and actually go through an example of is get into managing the database, and in particular dealing with users. So in all the previous examples, we logged in using the Postgres user, which is basically an admin account. And we had to remember the password, right? So we had to manage the password, and we basically have elevated permissions. In this scenario, we're going to do two examples. One is we're going to imagine we're a developer, and we want to grant a human being access to the database, but we don't want to have to manage their password. We're going to rely on identity access management to deal with the whole authentication part of the puzzle, and really just be able to then grant that user access to some part of the database that's not not an elevated permissions. The second example we're going to go through is do essentially the same thing, but grant a service account associated with a particular GCE instance and grant it some basic access to a database. And again, the beauty of this is we don't have to manage passwords. We're going to rely on identity access management to do the authentication part of the puzzle, and we're really just authorizing those users, either the service account or the user. Okay, so the feature is called Identity Access Management Database Authentication. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create it. Let's do it by example. So I'm going to start off by creating a new database, and let's go do that right now. SQL. And I'll create a new database. I'm going to do Postgres, and I'm going to call it MyDB2. Okay, and you do need to create that root password, right? So let me do that real quick. Now there's one other extra feature we're going to have to enable to get identity access management login, and let's see if it is. Okay, let me copy and paste this. There's a flag you need to enable on the database, and that is under Show Configuration Options, under Flags. You have to add a flag, and I'm going to paste it here because there's lots of flags. It's called Cloud SQL .im authentication, and you let it on. So done, and create instance. And it's going to create the instance. This takes like 5 to 10 minutes. So let me pause the video, and then we'll just keep on going from here. So let me see if I can find my video and pause. Okay, we're back. So the database has been created. Let's see what the next steps are. So now that we have our database up and running, yeah, so the first thing we need to do is go through an example of a user account, and then just seeing how we grant access to a user account. So the first thing we need to do is log in as the administrator. So we're going to grab the IP address of this thing, which is right here, and we need to log in to the database, PSQL. Host is this, user is Postgres. And then, oh, one thing I forgot to do. Oh, this is going to take a minute. Okay, I always forget to do this. So I forgot that right now this is, I'm using public IP, which means I need to actually add in my network, and I need to know what my IP address is. What is my IP address? It's here, my laptop. Today my IP address is this. Done, save, and then of course now this takes a few minutes, so I'm going to pause the video again. Okay, we're back. Hopefully this time I should be able to connect to the database, and okay, I'm logged in the database. And the first thing we want to do is to do our example is we need to actually create a database. So I'm going to copy these commands. I'm going to create a database. So I have a database because I'm going to grant limited access to just this database. So I need to connect to that database. I'm going to create a table just so I have some data to work with. And I think I want to populate that table with a record. So something to look at. And then we can validate that indeed does show the data, right? There's our data. So we basically want to be able to do the same operation, but maybe just read-only access for this user, right? And we need to know how to do it. So right now I'm running as the root account, so I can do all sorts of stuff, which is great for me, but not great for maybe a developer that you want to have limited access. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is I have another Gmail account I've been using, right? And so I'm going to run a number of commands to grant access to that person. So first I want to grant the ability to connect to the database. First thing I do is I need to actually have a user. So I need to go into, I forgot the step. So before I can actually grant access to the user, I need to be able to make that user available to the database. So under users, there is, by default, there's only the one account. So I add an account, and I want to use not built-in authentication, but I want to use Cloud IAM, and I just provide the user. So you hit add, and now one thing it does here, see it gives you this warning about that this user needs to have additional IAM permissions to access the database. Interesting enough, if you reload this, that error message goes away. At least it did for me last time. It did, right? That's because behind the scenes, once you do that in Identity Access Management, it went ahead and, where's that Identity Access Management? It actually went in and granted user 2, right? Granted them access to Cloud SQL instance user. So behind the scenes, it did that for you. So Didn't have to do that, but that is, so two things need to happen for a user to have access. One is they need to have this permission, right? And then separately, they need to be actually added to the database so that they know about it. So now that the user is there, I should now be able to grant role, right? Or grant a SQL role, secret, a SQL permission, right? I also need to be able to have them use the public schema on that database. And I want to basically give access to do select, basically, which is basically read on all the tables in that database, in that schema. Okay. Again, that's about SQL, and it's not really the nature. I mean, I don't want to get too deep about it, but basically now this user, it doesn't have super permissions. They can only have access to that one database, and they can only basically list tables. Okay. So, oops, what am I doing here? Okay, so that's that. Now we want to go through and figure out how, as that user, to be able to do those operations, right? So they have the users is in the database. They have the right permissions from an IAM permission. I've granted rights in the database, and we just basically need to test it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I need to log in first as me here. So let me see. Maybe I am already logged in as me. gcloud config list. And I actually already did this earlier. I'm logged in as user 2. That was just using gcloud init, right? And then what we need to do next is we need to set a password. And again, this is going to basically print an access token and then set to this environment variable to that token. And that's basically that's going to be the password that's being used by PSQL, right? So my password is basically my access token, and that took a while for me to figure that one out. And I need to basically log into the right database with this username and password, but I need to get, so let's see if I can get this right. So that's the host. The username is user2, right? And then the database is my app. So if this works, I should be able to get in, and I should say describe the tables, then select star from persons. Oh, right, and there I get my data. I shouldn't be able to do like an insert. So for example, out of curiosity, this should fail. I've never validated this, but I didn't have permissions. Right, so I don't have, with this user, I don't have permissions to actually insert. I can only list tables. Okay, the next example we're going to do, and let me pause the video here because I got to remind myself, but the next example we're going to do is use a service account. Actually, let's do this first. I need to actually create an instance, right? So let me just go into Compute Engine, and then I'll pause the machine while this is spinning up. So I'm going to create a new instance. Create instance. And I think by default, it's going to use the default compute user account, which is service account, which is fine. I don't think I need to set anything other than just hit create. Okay, so let me pause the video here while this starts up, and then we'll go through an exercise of essentially logging a database as a service account instead of an actual user account. Okay, so let me pause the video. Okay, we're back. So pretty sure the instance is up and running, but the first thing we want to do is grant the service account that was used for that instance to have access to the database. So if I go into Identity Access Management under Service Accounts, you will see that there's a service account here, right? And this is the Compute Engine default service account right here. Now, what's tricky about this is that the username that you're going to use here is not the entire email addresses that you might think. It's basically you drop the gserviceaccount.com for whatever reason. So I actually got the commands here all ready to go. So what I need to do is I need to go here. The account name is going to be, in this case, it's this part of it. So what I need to do is first, just like I did before for the regular user, I need to go to SQL. SQL. Now I'm kind of winging this. I'm hoping I don't run into problems here, but I go to SQL, I go to the database instance under users, and I need to add a user account, and we use Cloud Identity Access Management, and the member is, again, I'm going to do it without the rest of it. I cut it off here, and I hit add. Oh, interesting. So here I actually have to do the whole email address. Okay. So it is, in this case, oh, poop. Wait, here it is right here. Here it looks like you do need that gservice account on it. I bet you when I grant it, I don't though. So let's go here, there, and hit add. Okay, so now this service account has access, right? But then now that just allows them to log in, but I need to now grant them access to the database. So this is where I need to log in the database, which I need to log in as a super user. So it's this one, 502, logged in as the super user. Oh, it's trying to use that password from that. Okay, so I have to unset, I think it's unset PG password. Okay, now that I should be able to do this. Password is, okay. And then I need to connect to the database like I did before. What's that? Connect to my app. Okay, and then I need to then grant access. Okay, let's see if I get this right. Colon, yep. And this time I don't have the full email address, if you notice. That, and then basically read-only access, right? So then, okay, so now they've granted access. I can quit this. Okay, next thing I need to do is log into my VM instance, right? So that's under Compute Engine, VM instances. Here it is here. And I have a public IP. This. Okay, I'm logged in. Okay, so now to test this, I need, see, gcloud config list. So I'm logged in, and I'm logged in as this account, right? Okay, but I actually need to do, I need to get the Postgres client here. So let me apt update, and then I need to find the other command, which is I need to install the Postgres client. Yes, this shouldn't take too long. So now I got that. Now the next step is I need to be able to set my password. So let me do this. So now I'm using the access token of the, this is the access token for the service account. Now I should be able to log in. Well, I guess I have to like get it right now. So I have to go, let me see if I can do this right. So if I do, first of all, I need to remember who I am. So I have to do, oh, whatever. gcloud config list. Okay, so I have to do psql host equals, I need to go back here, find out the IP address. I can use the private IP address actually. Oh wait, no, this only has a public IP address, right? Because we didn't do the private IP address example. So this thing lives on a public IP address. There's that. Then I have to do a database, right? So I have to go cut to this database. And then I think, I have to give a username, right? So then I have to do username equals, if I get this right, I'll be like amazed. Then I have to use the first portion of this email address, not the whole one, and the password from the token. And of course it didn't work. I didn't. Oh, that's because I didn't grant access to this IP address, I think. Guessing that's what the problem is. I'm going to pause the video. I'll troubleshoot and come back in a minute. Yeah, so the problem is I'm connecting to a public IP address. So when I connect to this, it's going to use the public IP address of my instance, which is not allowed. So now I've got to go, I have to go back to Compute Engine. I have to grab the IP address of my instance. Then I have to grab the public IP address because that's how it's going to be seen from the database, right? Then I have to go to the database. So I copy that. I have to go to SQL. And I have to go to the database, connections, then authorize, add a network, call this instance, and in this case, done, save, pause the video while that loads, pause, okay, I'm back. And turns out that once I added that, I was able to run the command, but I ran into an error. And then it took me a minute to figure out what was going on. Turns out that when I created my instance, so there's a way, if you do run this, if you look at basically the documentation about how to use these user accounts with databases, they give you some troubleshooting tips at the bottom if you can't log in, because there's lots of steps to get it working. And this is the error that we got. And they give you this handy dandy, once you if you want to check your token out, make sure you're logged in the right user, you can run this command where it basically takes that access token and then basically dumps it out to shows you what's kind of in that token. And if I run that command here, I can see that this token is indeed, so where is this at here? Hang on. Let me try this again. Issued to this, right, so this is the service account, but what you'll see here is the scope here. The scope, I don't have, this is a very limited scope for this token. So even though this user, if you look at identity access management, this user has all sorts of permissions, right? So if I was to go under identity access management, where's identity access management? Identity access management. If you look under this service, this compute, they basically have cloud editor. Well, they have editor access, but they're also, looks like it gave them editor access for the database. So we have tons of access, right? But what we're missing is when I created that instance, so I basically have to log out of this instance, exit out of this instance, try this again. The mistake I made was home, compute engine, VM instances. When I created this instance, I didn't change the scope, so that the service account had very limited access. Even though the identity access was fine, their scope for that instance was scaled down, so they couldn't do a whole bunch. So that, I'll just show you how to create a new one here. I'm going to create a new instance here. Create an instance. Create schedule. I don't want to create a schedule. I want to create an instance. Where's create instance? Look at this screen all zoomed down here. Instances, operations. Okay, I'm going to have to pause the video until I can figure out how to create an instance. Oh, there it is, create instance. Okay, so this time I'm going to create instance too, but this time I go down here and I say allow full access to all APIs. And that was the mistake that I made here. So then I say create. I'm going to pause the video and then we'll log into this instance. And then we should be able to get this to work finally with that service account, hopefully. Pause the video. Okay, I'm back. So to catch back up, this time I created instance 2. Difference here was I checked the box to basically grant full scope for this user. So then I'm not limited to what I can do. I went back, I logged into the instance. I went back to the database. I gave it the IP address for this instance to allow it through, right? Then I logged into the instance. I installed Postgres client. I set the password again like I did before. And this time I tried to run the command where I log in to the SQL instance, to the database with the username, without the rest of the email address. And I get in, then I describe the tables, select star from persons, and again I'm logged in with just ability to read. So if I try to do something like this, insert a new value in the database, it should fail because again I only logged in with granted this service account read access to the tables in this database. Okay, well that was a little bit long, but we just illustrated how to all this stuff. Basically how to log in both as a developer with limited access, and then probably more importantly, how to log in as a service account. And again, that way you don't have to give that service account on that instance too high of privileges, and you don't have to deal with saving passwords and stuff like that. So that's really it for this video. Thank you.